are a lot of complaints about college football. Obviously, a lot of you want to expand the playoff, and people are upset with how targeting is enforced, yours truly included. But what's the number one complaint? If you guys were to stop and think for a second, maybe you make this complaint, but at the very least, you hear this complaint right along with me. What is the number one complaint that most folks have about college football right now? It probably sounds something like this. I'm tired of the same teams winning all the time. I'm tired of there being the same 3 or 4 teams with a chokehold on the sport, and it seems that there's a glass ceiling on 95% of these programs and they just can't break through. I would give you counterpoints to back up that that may not be entirely true, but I understand the larger argument there. The larger argument is true. There are a few programs that stand out above the rest. Kinda has always been that way, but I will grant you, over the past several years, it's really stood out. It's really been emphasized. That is one of the most popular arguments around the college football water cooler. Ironically, it also coincides with one of the least understood things in college football, and that is how to solve that problem. How do you achieve the balance that everyone so desperately longs for in college football? Well, a lot of folks think, like we just talked about, like we've talked about for a long time, a lot of people think that that change comes through an expanded playoff. The thinking out there, which I do not agree with at all, but the thinking out there is you expand the playoff, therefore more teams make the playoff every year. Therefore, by default, some teams are going to make it in for the first time every year. Therefore, those teams and programs are going to be able to go out on the recruiting trail, and they're going to be able to sell to student athletes, this is a place now where you have a chance to play for a national championship. Whereas in the past, you didn't. Now, I can tell you, I think the impact will be negligible. I don't think it will have a dime's worth of an impact. And it certainly will have fractionally the impact that a lot of people expect that to. I say this based on interaction with actual high school recruits. They don't talk about that stuff. Fans do. Media folks do. The players don't talk about it. They don't talk about them going to a college program because I'll have access to the playoff. In fact, they don't even talk about winning a championship being at the forefront of their decision making. They do want to be in a position to compete at the highest level. They do want that. They want to be developed and they want to play in the NFL. That's what they want. And that's not really going to change even if you have a 64-team playoff. But since everyone wants to talk about the expanded playoff, then the next sentence is, oh, and by the way, when you expand the playoff and more teams make it into the playoff, well then, slowly but surely, we'll infuse a little more parity and a little more balance in the recruiting rankings. It won't happen that way. I'm very confident in saying that. But I am here to tell you it doesn't have to be that way anyway. Because it's not like I'm telling you that and then in the next sentence saying, and that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so. There is no alternative. There is an alternative. There's one that actually makes sense. There is a very tangible, very theoretically achievable alternative out there that actually could produce all the results you're looking for. You don't even have to mess with the playoff. Do whatever you want to with it. You don't have to mess with the playoff, though. There could already be some factors in play. And so I wanted to tell you where those could come from. They come from recruiting. That's the name of the game, always has been, always will be. Talent acquisition. And it doesn't change because the playoff format changed. Any more than running a lawnmower over a weed stops the weed from growing. The weed just grows back. If you want to kill a weed, obviously you got to attack it by the root. Well, there's a big problem, at least for those of you who want a lot more balance in this sport. There's been a big problem over the last several years in this country when it comes to college football. And it stems from places like California and Texas and Florida, where there is an abundance, just a wealth of talent that has not stayed home. In fact, it is left home and gone to a few places like Tuscaloosa and Clemson and Columbus, Ohio, to such a disproportionate degree that those programs have won national championships in some cases because of taking your talent. But that just sounds broad. That's overarching. Here's our word of the year so far, anecdotal. That could be anecdotal in nature. Well, it's not. So what I had our production executives do today, and boy did they ever do it, I said, let's just look at all the 4- and 5-star talent from those 3 states over the past 8 years, and let's illustrate exactly how big this talent drain has been. Because I'm going to summarize all this with a very simple conclusion in a second that will give you the balance that you're looking for in college football. Colin, let's start in California. The state of California, 2015 to 2022 in recruiting, 39.7% of 4 and 5-star players remained in the state, meaning over 60% of the 4 and 5-star players left the state. In 2020 alone, Bryce Young went to Alabama, DJ Uiagalelei goes to Clemson, CJ Stroud goes to Ohio State, which are the three poster children, as far as I'm concerned, for the programs that have rated all three of these areas to a very, very high degree. Those were three of the top quarterbacks in America. If I change even one of those, think about how different things seem right now. Now, there's a change that's happened in California just in the last month or two, and that's at head coach at Southern Cal. So yes, is there some hope to be had here? Sure there is. We'll talk about that in just a second. But think about that. Under 40% of the in-state talent, 4 and 5-star and variety, has stayed home in California. Let's go to Texas. What about the Lone Star State? I would argue Texas has not been nearly as big a culprit here as the other two. But state of Texas, 2022, going all the way back to 2015, 52.3% of 4 and 5-star players have stayed home. 47.7% have left. Now look, Jimbo Fisher's had a lot to do with this. Tom Herman had a lot to do with this. Even though Texas didn't capitalize on the talent, they kept a lot of the talent home. Texas has kept more than half of their in-state 4 and 5 stars home the past 8 years. But think about the names and think about the impact these names have had. Jalen Waddle, for example, even in a good year otherwise for Texas, one of the biggest impact offensive players in America, top 10 NFL draft pick, goes to Alabama. Ohio State's loaded up off the state of Texas. J.K. Dobbins, Jeff Okudah, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, all those guys go to Ohio State from the state of Texas like a little pipeline has been built. It's not over. In fact, it gets a whole lot worse when we get down to the Sunshine State. I love visiting the state of Florida. Been down there a lot recently, but woo, Florida, state of Florida, 2015 to 2022, 40.1% of in-state 4 and 5-star players have stayed home. Nearly 60%, nearly 6 out of every 10 4 and 5-star players in the state of Florida have left the state of Florida. Famously, Alabama beat Ohio State a couple of years ago in a national championship game in which every member of Alabama's secondary was from the state of Florida. Here are some guys who don't play defense who have left Florida to go to Alabama. You've probably heard of some of them. Amari Cooper's one of them. Calvin Ridley's one of them. Jerry Jeudy's one of them. Alex Leatherwood's one of them. And then you got the guys like Pat Surtain and Jordan Battle and Josh Jobe. There was a guy named Derrick Henry that chose to leave the state of Florida to go to Alabama. They have won championships. They have done no less than win championships off the back of the talent that they have taken from the state like Florida, and they've gone into Texas and they've gone into California. My question to you is, how do you change that? Well, it's very simple. The way you change the dominance from a few programs when they're taking your talent is to do something that doesn't let them take your talent as much. No one is going to shut off Alabama recruiting. No one's going to shut off Ryan Day. The question is not whether you can completely make them go over in your state. The question is, what would happen if they had a couple less kids that caliber from your state per cycle? That's why guys like Lincoln Riley going to USC, or Mario Cristobal going to Miami, or Jimbo being at Texas A&M, Steve Sarkisian and his staff being at Texas, Billy Napier and the staff he's putting together at Florida, that's why that's the key. While everyone out there, while the casual society of college football is arguing about what an expanded playoff is going to do for parity in this sport, it's not going to do anything for the sport that doesn't first change here. This is how you change it at the root level. You're trying to run the lawnmower over the weed. It doesn't work. This is how you fundamentally change it. You lock down, at least to a greater degree, South Florida. And then if Mario misses on kids, don't let it be to Alabama. Let it be to University of Florida or Florida State. Texas and Texas A&M, to be honest with you, I don't have a whole lot of concern about. I think one of the programs that has the most to prove right now is Oklahoma. Oklahoma has gone a long way in fortifying this run they've been on from getting guys from the state of Texas. And they've gotten some guys from California too, and that was Lincoln Riley recruiting. Let's see if that continues. You know, the NIL thing, not to mention just a couple of really good recruiting staffs in the state of Texas right now. I think Texas is well on their way, but let me throw you some hypothetical numbers. What if instead of, let's say California, what if California, instead of keeping 40% of their players home, What if they just kept half of them? What if they kept 50%? Now, there's only one truly major recruiter out there right now. All due respect to UCLA, there's only one major recruiting power out there right now, and that's USC. So I understand there is not even enough room for all the 4- and 5-star talent in California. That's why I'm putting that number at 50%. Let's just hit it 50%. Keep 50% of the in-state 4- and 5-star talent home. How big a difference does that make? What about the state of Texas? I think Texas is well on their way. What if Texas is keeping 60% of their in-state 4- and 5-star talent home? I think they're going to hit that number, by the way. In fact, you look at the 2022 cycle, if you're watching on YouTube right now, they were well above 60% last year. And if you, on average, are hitting at that level over, let's say, a 4 or 5 year rolling span, you have fundamentally changed the trajectory of this sport for a number of out-of-state programs. What about the state of Florida? This number's abysmal. Down near 40% over the last several years. What if we turn that upside down? What if we just go 60%? What if Florida and Florida State and Miami and UCF, if you want to get involved in the party, that's cool. What if they combine to keep 60% of the in-state 4- and 5-star talent home? You have just totally altered college football if you do that. Alabama's not going to be bad all of a sudden, nor is Ohio State. But boy, while you elevate your programs, it's kind of a twofold reaction. You're elevating your program at the expense of some of those other major programs. This is the key to balancing college football. Has been for a while. I think the state of Florida first and foremost, but then also secondarily what Lincoln Riley can do in Southern California, and then to a somewhat a lesser extent, because it never was a huge problem, what Jimbo and Steve Sarkisian are doing in Texas, that's your key. And if you ever want balance here, if you ever want to stop looking at teams like Bama or Georgia or Ohio State any given year in November and asking, boy, how's anyone ever going to beat them? Well, you're asking that now because of the players they're getting from other states. This is how you somewhat slow that down. And at the very least, you have a little more competitive balance at the end of the year. So they're telling you that one way solves it. I'm telling you another way will solve it. And I just happen to believe we're right on this.